Let's have a port party.
I'm Greg.
I'm Julie, and we're the Crafty Winers.
So 20 years ago, we both tasted port at a little haunted hotel in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And it was something that we had never had before, and it was offered to us, it was suggested to us by the waiter.
To go with our dessert. Yeah.
And we were already, I think, several sheets into the wind at that point.
Couple bottles of wine in.
It was very memorable. It was an amazing experience with the dessert and the port wine. And ever since then, I've been kind of a port fan, but didn't ever pursue it. And then when we started making wine, I thought it would really be cool to make port wine because it had been 20 years since I'd had it. So I went and bought every port that I could find.
Oh, you did.
I didn't spend more than $30 for a bottle of port, but got some Kirkland, which was really good, some Taylor, 10-year-old port, which was really good, and a bunch that were not as good. But I decided that I liked the tawny ports a lot better. So this recipe is going to be focusing on tawny port. And our port, after a lot of work and a lot of experimentation, because there isn't a lot on the internet that tells you exactly how to make it. So this one is going to tell you exactly how to make it, but it's the way that we came up with. So, there may be better ways. But our port tastes really close to like the Kirkland Tawny 10-year port.
Yeah.
So we will tell you, we're going to go through step by step how we accomplish that. I'm having to cheat here and use notes because this is a little bit more complex than most of the wines that we make, and it's got measurements that are important. Yeah. What we wanted to do was come up with a port that was between 18 and 20% ABV at the end. We didn't want to throw any of the wine out to make room for the hard liquor that we're going to be adding. So typically, port that you're going to buy at the store that comes from Portugal, because that's where port comes from, and we're not, by the way, this is a port style wine. We're not going to claim that this is a port because I think that is a crime in Portugal to call it port if it didn't come from Portugal.
It's probably a law.
So this is a port style wine. But typically it is a grape brandy that you make this with. We don't have that available to us, or at least it's not easy to get. So we are using Everclear, which is also not terribly easy to get depending on where you are, but it is 151 proof, meaning 75.5%. The grape brandy is usually 80%, so this is really close. Everclear is grain-based, and it has a very distinct flavor, but as you'll see through this process, that flavor goes away.
Thank God.
After about 2 months of being together, the wine and the Everclear meld, for lack of a better term, and you won't probably be able to tell that it's Everclear, at least I can't tell that it's Everclear that is the fortifying alcohol. So we aren't using this for a while, actually for about 2.5 days. So we will come back to that. So first thing that we're going to do is start with our basic wine that we're going to start this from. And we're using Tempranillo juice concentrate. There are several different wines that you can use. I'll list some of them up because I didn't really research that before starting the video. So I'll put them up in text as I'm editing. Tempranillo is one of the more common ones, and Tempranillo is what we were able to get a hold of. So because we're adding a full fifth or 750 milliliters of Everclear, I want to leave room for that, which is part of what makes this a little more complex, because I don't want to discard any of our juice that we make. So we're leaving room for a fifth of Everclear at the top of our gallon so that we aren't throwing any out. So what we're ending up with is, first thing first, this is Wine Expert Tempranillo, came in a kit. All the other ingredients in the kit went into our kit container that we might use if we run out of important things. So yes, the concentrate comes from a kit, but this isn't a port kit. So we are wanting to end up with 102.4 ounces, which is, here's a gallon, here's 102. So we're leaving that much room at the top so that once the fermentation is done, or when we say the fermentation is done in this case, we've got room for that fifth of Everclear. So that means we are going to add 36 ounces of concentrate. Normally it would be 45 if you follow the manufacturer's instructions. It would be 45 ounces for a gallon. We're putting 36 ounces. Now, I want to end up with a 6.5% wine with half of the sugar still there needing to be fermented or wanting to be fermented when we stop it. We're going to stop fermentation by pouring the Everclear in, which is going to leave the desired amount of sugar that port wine has. So first thing that I'm going to do is look to see where my 36 ounces is on my pitcher, and it's right there. So I'm going to add my concentrate to that mark, 36 ounces. You saw that I shook up the bag, right, to incorporate it beforehand? I did that, just trust me. Okay, so now I'm going to get all the air out of the bag because I removed some of the liquid just to make it so that this lasts longer. Put the cap back on and put this back in my fridge. Okay, so I've got my 36 ounces of concentrate in here. Now I'm going to add water up to the 77 ounce mark. And the reason that's 77 is that is 75% of 102.4, which is the mark that we're going to stop at. So the 75% mark is where we're going to use our calculator to see how much sugar we need to add. So that's a little complex, but just trust me, add water till you get to the 77 ounce mark. Okay, so that is pretty close to 77. It might be closer to 78 ounces, but that'll work. So now I'm going to mix this up real good. So depending on the wine concentrate you use, your results are probably going to be different. There's going to be different sugar amounts. But this is the same juice that I've used the prior times to make port. So I'm expecting this to come out right now to a specific gravity of about 1.124. Again, this is only 75% of our what we're going to call a gallon. That is actually a gallon minus 1/5 for our Everclear. So we'll take our gravity, and I'm going to do my best when we're editing this to try to explain in text a little bit better than probably what I'm doing verbally on why we're doing these measurements. So this is at 75% full. That means that we still have water that we're going to add, but at this amount of water, this amount of dilution of the concentrate, we are at 1.124, which is exactly where I was last time I did this, and that's good. So she's going to use our calculator on craftywiner.com/tools, our calculate ABV calculator, and she puts in 1.124 for the current gravity. We want this to be 13% if we were going to let it go all the way and convert all of the sugar to alcohol, which we're not. But if we were, we're starting with 13%. Mm-hmm. And then she goes to where it asks for the target must gallon. So that's important to change that. Normally we leave that at a gallon, but this is going to be 0.8, 0.8 of a gallon that we're actually creating here. So it's important to change that number. So 0.8.
Okay.
And then when you get down to the percent full, yeah, so this is where the calculator is kind of nice. Good luck trying to do this manually or on a calculator. So the vessel percent full is 75%. Mm-hmm. So now she scrolls down to how much sugar we need to add to get all of this to come out right. It is
not a whole lot. 1.52 ounces.
1.5. Our scale doesn't go to 2 decimal point places, so we're going to get 1.5 ounces of sugar and put that in here. This is probably the least amount of sugar we've ever put into a wine. It's because there's already a lot of sugar in here, and we're not after. We don't want this to be, since it's a tawny port, we don't want it to be really sweet. And we are going to stop this fermentation halfway through. So we're not putting a lot of sugar in. So put that in there. The reason why we on all of our videos, you'll see that we stop at 75%, and that's to give us room for the amount of sugar that we need to add. It wasn't necessary.
Need much room in this one.
It wasn't necessary now, but I'm going to go ahead and fill this up now. Again, not to the gallon mark, but to the 102.4 or 102 mark on my pitcher. No dogs back there to... Oh, there's one dog. To get the bottle. Here comes the busybody.
What are you doing, Pet? What are you doing?
We're leaving town after we're done filming, and she knows that, so she's acting a little weird today. She's pacing.
Her stuff is by the door. She's ready to go.
Before I fill this up, I'm going to put my juice back in there, and it's good I did, because that is 102 right there. So now, I'm going to mix this up again, and we will get our initial gravity reading. If you haven't made wine before, I would suggest starting with one of our other winemaking videos, because
Yes.
if you don't, I have a feeling that this video would be very confusing to know why we're doing some of the things that we're doing. But initial gravity we usually are going to take when this is at a gallon, but
Not in this case.
not in this case. Based on the last time, if we were doing everything the same as the last time, and I believe we are, we should end up with a gravity of around 1.098. It's a little foamy, but I'm not going to argue with it. I think it's 1.098. It's exactly what we had last time. It's under the foam, but... So, what we're going to end up wanting to do here is, when this gets down to half of the sugar that's in here being fermented to alcohol, we're going to pour the Everclear into it to stop the fermentation in its tracks. Because we have to wait for another filming day, it may not work out quite that way. So what we'll do instead of pouring the alcohol in, because we want you to see that step, we'll move this into our fridge. And that will, because our fridge is around 40 degrees, it'll take it a little while, maybe half an hour to an hour, to chill it to the point to where the fermentation stops. And that will be good enough for us to wait to get back on camera, where we're going to pour the Everclear into it. But one more thing we want to do before we pitch our yeast, and that is check our pH. Now, in the past, on this particular concentrate, our pH has been fine, and I haven't had to add anything. We want our pH on all of our wines. It doesn't really, well, actually on any of our alcoholic beverages, we want to put the yeast in when the pH is around 4, and we will adjust it to get it around 4 if we have to. This is 3.96, 3.97 now. It's close enough to 4 that we're not going to do anything to it, and that's the way that it's been in the past too. So the juice that you use may be more acidic, probably will be more acidic, and you may need to add some potassium bicarbonate to it to raise the pH to 4. But you can watch our video on pH management to see how to do that if you're not aware. Again, this isn't a good wine to start with. If you've never made wine at home before, I would suggest starting with a Merlot or a Cab or something that's a little bit more straightforward. Even a Tempranillo, if that's the juice that you ended up with.
Yeah.
So, we are going to prepare our yeast. Now, a lot of our wines, we put both tannin and pectic enzyme in at this stage. We're not doing pectic enzyme today because it's not, on a port-style wine, in my opinion, that comes from concentrate, it's not necessary to put the pectic enzyme in it. Tannin, so port is a medium tannin wine. It's optional. On one of the batches that I have made of this port, I did not put tannin in. Actually, 2 batches I did not put tannin in. This one we're going to put tannin in so that we can compare. So it's a half teaspoon of tannin. It's fine to just put that directly into this, but this is a really tough thing to mix. Mm-hmm. So for that, and because the yeast wants it warm,
and this
and the go from, yeah, she's going to warm that up in the microwave. And I'm going to rinse off our pH meter.
Okay, so I heated this up for 10 seconds in the microwave, and that varies depending on the temperature of your...
It should get it around 80, 85 degrees with a quarter cup.
Yeah.
We aren't measuring the temperature, but we have many times in the past.
So half teaspoon of tannin, and then I'm going to put in 2 teaspoons of Go Firm.
Go Firm, totally, absolutely optional on this. You probably don't need it because you're only letting this ferment for a few days. So I'm using Go Firm on all of our wines because, it's we like to be in a habit of doing things the same way. You don't need to go out and get Go Firm for this particular one if you don't already have it. The tannin, though, definitely you're going to want to heat it up for both the tannin and the Go Firm. And again, the tannin was also optional, so you can skip all of this. But you still do want to warm it up for your yeast. Mm-hmm. We are using 71B yeast. There are a couple of reasons for that. The 71B tends to end up with less SO2 in the end, so it's less acidic, and that's what we want for this particular wine. The alcohol is going to preserve this wine just fine without needing SO2 in it. There's nothing is going to grow in this particular port. It's not supposed to.
Not with that Everclear in it. Okay. I think we're good for the...
So this is the right temperature now for her to go ahead and pitch the yeast. If you didn't follow the way that we just did this, you'll want to put this in a warm area for like 80, 85 degrees and let the must warm up, preferably before you put the yeast in. And then we're going to leave it there for about 2 hours after the fact to let the yeast to get really nice and happy.
If I could get the packet open. Okay. There we go. Got it.
She's going to end up putting about 3/4 of a teaspoon to a teaspoon of yeast. This is one that we've used before. That's why it's already open. Keep it in the fridge if you do that, and it'll stay fine for a long time.
I don't know if that was quite...
That's
probably good. All right. They thought I was dropping a treat. Did you see how quick she got up?
She's got good reflexes when she thinks food's hitting the floor.
Then I'm just going to lightly dunk this a little bit just to get it... I'm not even going to say the word. I hate that word.
Hydrated.
Hydrated. That's a good one. Not the M word. Okay. And then this is going to go into our furnace room.
For 2 hours.
2 hours to get happy.
So we're using this Chinese big mouth, a little over a gallon. I think it's 1.4, either 1.4 or 1.2 gallon. It comes on Amazon. I will link it in the description below. These are nice. The reason I'm using this is because one of the most important parts of port-style wine is stopping the fermentation when it gets to the right point. So with the measurements that I've used, that I've given you here, we want half the sugar to be converted to alcohol, and we want half the sugar to still be in here to give us the level of sweetness that we're after. So that means, starting at 1.098, we want to stop fermentation at 1.047. So to do that, you can either, every 3 hours or so, use your hydrometer and take a reading once you think you're getting close and find where it's at 1.047. Or you can do what I'm doing, and I'm using a tilt hydrometer, and that is a whole lot easier way to do it. So because we're using the tilt, we need a wide mouth, because if you stick this in a regular carboy, you'll have a hard time getting it out, if you can even get it in.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and put my must, and this is just standard Tempranillo wine must right now. But next time you see us, that will have changed. I'm not having to give you any instructions on Go Firm or aeration or removing CO2 or doing any of that stuff that you might have to do in wines that you're letting go to fully fermented, because we're going to be stopping it. So what this ended up taking is around, let me look to see, so this is very temperature dependent. The warmer you ferment this, the quicker it's going to ferment. In our case, we did it at 89 degrees, and we did that by using a carboy heater. But you don't have to do that. You can do it at a cooler temperature, and just keep in mind that it's going to take longer than what I'm going to tell you. But at 89 degrees, it took, after we pitched the yeast, which we're doing in 2 hours from now, it took 42 hours for us to go from a specific gravity of 1.098 to a specific gravity of 1.047. I started this at 10 o'clock in the morning, and 2 days later, at 5 o'clock in the morning, yes, believe it or not, I got up at 5 o'clock to check it. It was done. It was exactly 1.047, and that's hard to believe, I know, and I had to tell her. It really did happen.
I don't know. I still don't believe it.
I got up at 5 o'clock, and it was perfectly at the right gravity last time that we did this.
It's his story, and he's sticking to it.
So about that amount of time. It'll take around 48 minus 6 hours. So 42 hours to at 89 degrees. Again, tilts are nice to know when you hit that. Unfortunately, the tilt app doesn't let you set an alarm at this point in time, which would be nice, but not everybody makes port wine. So most of the time you want to let it completely ferment. But when it hits that, you're going to want to do the next step that we'll show you next time we film. If you can't do that, you can do what we will probably end up doing, and that's stick it in the fridge and let it stop because it gets too cool. And that doesn't kill the yeast, that just makes the yeast stop fermenting. Basically, they go into hibernation. So that's what we're going to do, and we will, the next filming day, we'll tell you how that ended up working out for us. So pitch the yeast after it's nice and foamy after about 2 hours at 85 degrees, and we will see you probably in a week. Okay, so it's a week later. Took it almost exactly the same time, almost to the hour, but don't expect that yours is going to take exactly the same amount of time. But I started this at noon, and 2 days later at 7, so I didn't have to get up quite as early. It hit the 1.047. Again, I knew that because I had an app on my phone that shows me the hydrometer reading from a tilt hydrometer that's in here. If you don't have that luxury, I feel sorry for you, because you do want to try to hit it right at that halfway, half the sugar's fermented mark. So you're going to have to kind of watch the hydrometer till you get close, and then watch the hydrometer a lot. And then when it hits that 1.047 or whatever your halfway mark is, then you're going to want to pour Everclear in. This finished several days ago, though. This has been sitting in our fridge. And you can see by the crud that's on the walls of this that it was a pretty active fermentation until it wasn't.
Yeah, it was.
Until I froze it, so to speak. Don't freeze it.
Chill it.
But there is sediment down at the bottom. We're not worried about any of that stuff right now. The only thing that we're going to do before this warms up again is we're going to pour 1/5 of Everclear in it. Oof. And I know that a lot of port lovers are going, what the hell? You can't make port out of Everclear.
But you can.
But I challenge those people when this is done to tell me that there's Everclear in it instead of grape brandy. I don't think they would be able to tell. So now you see why we wanted to only make 8/10 of a gallon, because we need to have room for the Everclear. When the Everclear is all poured in there, we now have exactly a gallon, which is going to work well for subsequent steps, because we are still dealing with a 1 gallon container.
I can smell that.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Everclear. Neither of us are fans of Everclear.
It's like rubbing alcohol.
I'm going to sanitize my hand again, because I'm going to grab the tilt out of here. We put it on a banner blurb down at the bottom, so I don't say it every time, but everything has been sanitized in Star San. But I just did it again to make sure that I can safely touch the hydrometer.
Now you get crud everywhere.
And I brought this just for that reason. So, all we're doing in this step is adding the Everclear and adding, in this case, 2 ounces, which is more oak than we normally do, but this Tawny style port we found needs more oak.
Really needs the oak.
So in Portugal, when they make this, and it's not actually what we're calling a port style wine, this will age like this, without the oak cubes. This will age with the brandy and the wine that's half fermented. This will age for 10 years in an oak barrel. Mm. We're not that patient. I don't think you are either, probably. So we're getting past that by using oak cubes, but we still have to give this some time. Not 10 years, but we're going to give this 2 months. It seems to be almost a magical length of time for this Everclear to meld with this and not taste like Everclear anymore. And this actually starts tasting like a port. So after 2 months has passed, what we're going to end up doing, I'm going to describe some of this now because we're only going to do one more filming segment on this port. So I'm going to describe to you what we're going to end up doing between now and the next one, which is going to basically end up being our finished product. After 2 months, I'm going to taste this. We're going to taste this. And we're going to decide whether or not it's been long enough. Can we detect the flavors that we want to? Has the Everclear gone away so that it just tastes kind of like a young port wine. And if the answers to that are yes, if it's no, we're going to give it more time. If the answers to that are yes, then we have kind of a next most complicated part of this. The other thing that 10 years in the cask does is aerates this more than other wines ever need to be, or any more than you want them to be. You actually want this to be oxygenated and oxidized, and it gives it a nutty flavor that tawny ports are known for. And without that, honestly, it's still pretty good, but it's not the same without that oxygen. So I've tried a whole bunch of different ways, and that's part of the reason why it's taken us. And literally, I've been working on trying to do this video, trying to get to the point where we could do this video for 6 months. But part of the reason was I couldn't figure out exactly how to get the oxygen part reproducible so that you could do it at home. I tried using the little Ace Hardware oxygen tanks that we use for aerating our wines, and I ended up going through like 10 of those. And that's pretty expensive because they're $15 a piece.
And they're not refillable.
I got a 30-pound oxygen tank from our local welding supply store, and that's probably what I'm going to end up doing on this particular one. That works fairly well, although it's a little bit inaccurate because it's not meant to have such a low output. So that might be problematic, but we'll find out. And one of those two, that should be a lot cheaper because it was only like $30 for all of the oxygen that we're going to need to pump through here. There are probably other ways, and if that doesn't work for us, we'll figure out something that will work. But you do want to put oxygen through this to intentionally try to turn this into vinegar, although you never will because the ABV is so tall. But what it will do, it'll impart a nutty flavor that you get from a tawny port. And you don't get that unless you do pump oxygen through this or let it sit for 10 years in a oak cask. The other thing of note is you'll notice we didn't put any sorbates in this, any metabisulfites, and you don't want to do that. You don't need to, for one, because the Everclear is going to protect this better than those will, the high ABV. The other thing is that the metabisulfite can make it so that the aeration doesn't happen. It actually keeps the oxygen molecules from binding with the wine. So you don't want to do that or your aeration step won't work. But again, it's not necessary because you just gave this wine protection that'll last it for years and years and years by adding the Everclear. So we are going to wait 2 months and then we will be back to show you the finished product, and I'll describe what it is that we did to aerate it. Almost 3 months have gone by. So notice we have less port now than we had, if you're really carefully watching this video.
Yeah.
So what's happened is I'm going to use the corgi cam to show this big oxygen. This has worked in the past. Hi, Pippin. How you doing? This has worked for us in the past, and I think I mentioned a couple months ago that this regulator that I bought for this is a little bit touchy when you're talking about small amounts of oxygen that you're wanting to pump out. This is meant for welding. So it got away from me. I needed about 30 hours of oxygen to be pumped through this to get the oxidation level that I wanted. So I was not staying in the same room with it. I was setting it and leaving. And one night I came back, and I'll put up on the screen the mess that I walked into. So that's where this went. The regulator got away. It's not meant for doing small pressure levels, and it blew basically a bunch of this port all over our bar. So luckily the bar is watertight, and it didn't go further than that, but yeah, we lost it. There was no way I was putting it back in the jar. This is a different jar than what you saw last time because I racked it off the one and put it into this one that I felt was going to be easier to oxygenate. So, as I said, the little tiny Ace oxygen tanks, which I guess I don't have one on set right now, the little tiny ones you can get from a hardware store, that's a really expensive way to do 30 hours putting through here. We went through a lot of those before I realized that was just going to be too expensive because they don't have enough oxygen in them for the time that you need to pump the oxygen through to get that oxidation level. So the big thing is not going to work because I couldn't find a regulator that was supposed to be more precise. So that's out. That's going back to the welding store. So what did I do? I bought a pump meant for aquariums and a little regulator that's meant for I guess also aquariums and such, and then some adapters to get it to work. And then on the end of this tube is an aerator. So I'll list this stuff. You don't have to do it exactly the way that I did it, but this ended up being perfect for us, for what we were trying to do. And I'm going to show this just for a second, even though we're at the level we want to be at. I'm going to show you how this works. I can do 2 of these. Oh, I love the smell of that. Her, maybe not so much, but
I like it.
so I can use the splitter to do 2 of these at once if I wanted to, and hopefully at some point I'm doing it in that level. But I'm going to turn my pump on here, which you actually just plug it in. There's no switch.
Oh, there we go.
So I have control over the level of oxygenation, and I really tried to keep it as high as I felt that I safely could, safely after my blowout. So this is actually pretty close to where I had it. And I had it like this for a total of about 30 hours. It takes a long time, and that's without metabisulfite being added to this to protect it from oxygen. I think it's just the alcohol level that's in here that does also protect it a little bit. It took a long time for it to get that nutty flavor, and poor Julie had to taste it I don't know how many times during that process. If we counted all the times through all the batches of this I've made so far, she's had a lot more port than she probably cares to have. But so this level of bubbling, at least this level, and a little more if you think you can, if you can do it. And I had more headroom or less headroom to start with. I had more liquid in here to start with. It's at the level now that I'm comfortable. If she tries it, she'll agree that it's probably at the right level now. I'm going to unplug this again. The pump isn't terribly expensive, but if you're not serious about port, it may be more than what you're willing to pay. So
just stick it in an oak cask and wait 10 years.
You can do that. I ended up putting the oak back in here when I racked it. I took the oak out, or took it off the oak, but decided when it did get the level of oxygen that I was after, it seemed that the oak went away a little bit. So I put the oak back in, and it's been in there for another couple of weeks after that. So,
well, I haven't tasted it since
she has not tasted actually, I haven't either after the oak has been in here again. So I'm just going to mix it up to make sure that all that oak flavor is mixed well. And we are tasting this for the first time as what we expect to be the final product. And now I am mentally going to be trying to compare this to like that Kirkland, the Costco brand.
What's the one I really liked?
That was a Taylor 10-year.
No, Ben something? Ben?
Let me grab it.
That's what it was. Okay.
So these are the dusty tawny ports. Dusty because we're doing remodeling on part of our house right now, and they've been sitting for a while. These are the 3 10-year-old tawnies that we've got. My favorite is probably between the Kirkland and the Ben 27. Ben 27 is what she likes the most. This is also very good, and it's almost gone. Any of these are good, and I'm hoping that ours is comparable to any of these. I would be happy. Ruby port is another variety of port, and it is not as complex. It doesn't usually have the oak. A lot of times it's not going to be aged hardly at all.
And it's
sweeter.
It's
basically like grape juice with alcohol in it. And if that's what you're after, you can skip you can skip almost everything that we did. Stop after you add your Everclear, let it sit for 2 months just to integrate, and then rack it, and you're done with that's pretty much a ruby port. But these are the complex ones that are oxygenated and have oak, and even the tannin you probably would skip if you were just after a ruby.
Yeah, probably.
But let's see how close. We're not going to actually taste these to compare. I know what these taste like. We're gonna compare it to our memory of what those are like.
Okay, yeah, I taste the oak is back.
Yep. This is really good. Yeah, this is as good as those.
Without waiting 10 years.
There is no... If you wait 10 years, it'll probably be even better, but you're going to have to keep the oak in there.
Yeah.
There is no hint of that being Everclear anymore. I don't think anybody would be able to tell it that it's got Everclear to fortify it. But it's got the nutty flavor. The sweetness level, I think, is
Good. Yeah.
great. It's the same as these.
And the oak.
And it's very complex. And I think the tannin was a good addition. That you can
so, too.
you can try it with or without adding the tannin. There's tannin already in the grapes. So you're adding tannin to what was already there, and you're not going to probably know what was there. So that's why we don't normally add it. But we did on this batch. So
I think it was good.
this is really good.
Yeah.
So now all we need is cheesecake and a night that we can,
Or how about tiramisu?
or tiramisu, and a night that we don't have anything going on so that we're okay drinking 20% alcohol. This is better chilled or 50 degrees or colder, maybe a little bit colder. Around 50 degrees is a great temperature for
Yeah,
this.
it is.
Warmer and colder I wouldn't necessarily recommend. Much colder or much warmer than 50. So this is great. I've been so excited to do this video. I'm glad we've finally done it. So I hope you try this.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work
Sure.
to bring this to you. At this point in time, nobody else that I've ever found has done an instruction on how to make this.
And he's looked.
And I've spent a lot of time looking, and I've done a lot of my own experimentation to try to come up with this. So
And it's great.
it's good.
Thank you guys once again for watching this video. I hope you really enjoyed this one. It took a long time to come to be, as he said. Please like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And if you have, thank you very much. We appreciate your support. And until next time, cheers!